why didn't they just leave? Or what took so long for them to leave? Perhaps these are questions that you've asked or even wondered about someone who was in a relationship with a narcissist or with a toxic person. I'm going to answer that question for you today, give you multiple different reasons, and the last one might shock you.
Give it up for the author of You're My Favorite,
Author Ginny Preem.
Let's give it up for
Ginny Preem, everybody. Hi, Ginny.
Hi, I'm Ginny Preem, a keynote speaker, a life coach, a best-selling author, and a podcast host of the podcast Drinking with Gin. Over there, just like here, we talk about narcissism, narcissist abuse, toxic relationships, and behaviors. Today, I want to answer a question that comes up often, and that is, why didn't they just leave? Or why don't they leave? Why did they stay for so long? And there are a lot of different answers to that question. So I want to unpack some of those answers here for you today to get a little bit better understanding of why people don't just leave the narcissist or just leave the abusive, toxic relationship. And like I said, the last one might kind of shock you. So make sure that you listen to the end. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and get notifications when I put out new videos. I'm so glad that you're here and welcome back. Now, this video is going to really dive into specifically romantic relationships, partnerships, marriages, whatever that looks like. But this is the type of relationship where people most often ask this question. It's a little bit easier to maybe leave a friendship than it is to leave a family member or a romantic partnership. But I really want to talk about the romantic partnerships, relationships, marriages here today and address that question because this is the one that we most often get asked this question about. Well, why didn't they just leave? Why did they stick around for so long? Or why haven't they left yet? So the first reason I'm going to give is sometimes one of the most common, especially if there are children involved. If someone actually realizes that they are in a relationship with a narcissist, a sociopath, a dangerous personality, and they have children with them, they may choose to stay because when there are children involved, the parent that is enduring the narcissist abuse may choose to stay so that they can spend more time around the children and not have to split custody with the narcissist, the sociopath, or the dangerous personality. That way they are not spending one-on-one time with the parent that is exhibiting emotional, psychological, and mental abuse. Oftentimes what we see is when children go back and forth between these types of households, the healthy parent spends just as much time undoing what was done at the manipulator's house just in time for them to then go back. So they may feel like it's a better situation and scenario to just endure what they're going through for the sake and the benefit of the children. They may choose to stay out of protection for the children, feeling like they have more control and a better ability to protect the children in one household. The second reason is often financial. Narcissists love to control and use finances and money and hold it over their supply and their victims' heads. Oftentimes, a narcissist will want to control their partner, have them not work so that they can control all of the money and the finances. That way the victim has no ability and they are financially dependent on the narcissist, and then they don't have the ability to actually leave. They have no income. They maybe don't have an education. They haven't been in the work field for a while. So they don't have the skills to then go be able to get a job. They haven't had the ability to save any money because the narcissist is controlling it. So they may be completely financially dependent, and control is one of the key pillars that narcissists want to do. They want to control and they want to isolate their victims. And this is one of the ways that they do it very successfully so that the victim cannot leave the relationship. So it might be for the children, it might be for financial reasons that they stay as well. The third reason is something that we call the sunk cost fallacy. Have you ever heard of the sunk cost fallacy? Well, this is the idea that once you've gotten so far into something, you've invested so much into it, that it's hard for you to imagine letting go of it. Maybe you've done that with a job before. You stayed longer, holding out hope that things were going to get better. or you stayed in a friendship for longer than you should. Again, holding out hope that maybe things would improve or things would change or things would be different. And oftentimes that's the same thing that happens in these relationships with narcissists, sociopaths, dangerous personalities, that once you've invested so much time, people then start to beat themselves up, where they're like, well, I've invested this much time, maybe I'll just wait until the kids graduate and leave the house. Then I'll take that next step. Or then that time comes around and then they continue to stay because, well, I've already invested 20 years at this point, I can endure it a little longer. And so it kind of gets to this point of where there's also the example of the Concorde airplane, where they knew it wasn't good, it wasn't going to be successful, but they continued to invest in it because they'd already invested so much. So oftentimes this is the same thing that can happen in these abusive types of situations and relationships, because people hold out hope that it might get better, or they just feel badly about the amount of time that they've invested to throw it all away. And this last reason might shock you. Oftentimes, people that are in a relationship with a narcissist or a sociopath don't recognize and realize that they are being abused. Psychological abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse oftentimes aren't looked at as abuse. Well, if they're not hitting me, this is something that we often hear victims say, well, they're not hitting me or anything. And so people don't always recognize the signs of the psychological, mental, and emotional abuse, even financial abuse that I talked about earlier. They don't see this as a problem when you're in it. This is why we call it CPTSD. Whereas PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is caused usually by one big traumatic event. CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, is all of these little micro events that happen along the way. The gaslighting, the manipulation. And that is why narcissists are so good at this manipulating and this gaslighting that people don't oftentimes realize that it's happening. That's why they begin to think that they're going crazy. And because it's happening so often and so frequently, it becomes familiar. This pattern becomes familiar and it feels like it's just a way of life. It's quite frequent that until a big event happens with these dangerous personalities like narcissists, that the victim that's been enduring the abuse doesn't realize what's been happening until they're out of it. And once you're out of it and you can see it and you have that clarity, you can't unsee it. And so we see very frequently victims of narcissist abuse really start to learn about the signs, the symptoms, the tactics, the manipulative behaviors after the relationship has ended, after they've actually exited it, because they don't often realize that they are being abused in this situation. And some people don't even view it as abuse. As I mentioned earlier, well, at least they're not hitting me, is something that we hear people say often. But narcissist abuse is psychological abuse, and oftentimes people will start to show physical symptoms. I've shared before that when I was in a relationship with a narcissist, I had shingles on my face. My hair broke off and fell out. I had abnormal skin cancer lesions that I had to have removed. Sometimes our bodies tell us the signs that something isn't right, but because of these series of CPTSD, this complex post-traumatic stress disorder, all of these little micro, constant, consistent traumas that are happening along the way, they eventually build up and create this one big trauma that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back and makes them finally leave. There are probably many more reasons why people might stay in a narcissistic, abusive relationship, but I wanted to share a couple because this question does come up a lot. And so if you are wondering it, or maybe you wondered, why didn't I leave sooner? I hope that this shed a little bit of light or gave a little bit of information on why sometimes people don't leave, or why they didn't just leave, or why they haven't left yet. There could be a slew of different reasons, and these are just a few. There's probably many more. If you have additional questions, things that you'd like me to cover here, please put it in the comments. I hope that you found this helpful, and I can't wait to see you again next time.